Here I have a couple large sides of halibut, and this is how you'll normally order it in, even for a restaurant setting, because there's 4 of these sides per halibut fish, because halibut are a flat fish, and you're just going to have 2 of these sides per actually flat side of the fish. So to get in a whole halibut, it's quite a large fish to have to go and break down, and it's quite the process. So normally you get in and get it just like this, fillet skin off. And I'm going to lay it diagonally across my cutting board because it is so large. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut the tail portion off. And sometimes you can get a small little serving off of this. But if you look at it, it's kind of weird shaped and it's thin. So why sell that to somebody when someone else is going to get a nice fat fillet? I'm going to save that for my ceviche. Now you see this red line that runs down the fish. That's a natural seam that will split during the cooking process. So the first couple of portions that you cut from the tail piece are going to have that seam in it, so you need to be careful when you go back later to cook it. What I like to do, however, is I like to cut on one side of that seam and basically split the halibut in 2. So first I'm going to square off this top portion, which you can later go back and cut more fillets out of after you trim it down a little bit. But this is going to give you a nice clean center cut to work with. And see how I'm staying on the left side or on one side of that seam as I'm splitting the halibut all the way down. This is going to give me a nice block of fish to work with and to cut some nice easy fillets from. Now, my golden rule for fabricating fish is you want to make sure that everyone gets a beautiful portion. Now, you want to also make sure that you're maximizing your yield, and here I'm cutting about an 8 to 9 ounce portion. Our portions are fairly large at Stella. And when I'm cutting a portion, I'm going to be using one solid knife stroke straight through. That way I don't get hacksaw marks on my fish. But it's up to you as a chef to take all of your scrap portions and turn that into another great dish. One thing that we just actually started doing is a ceviche halibut chalupas with a homemade chalupa shell and a nice beautiful halibut ceviche. So that's just a little side note. Now you'll notice we have this piece here now that has the vein running down it, but because it's off to one side, there's not going to be enough weight on either side of that vein to actually split the fish after roasting it. So this is going to allow you to cut some nice even portions all the way down the loin without having to jeopardize the integrity of the fish during the roasting process. Now we return back to that head portion, which has some connective tissue and a little bit of silver skin. I'm going to trim that off. Now that can actually be filleted off later and thrown into your scrap pile, but here you can see that we're getting another 2 portions off of this head just by squaring it and trimming it properly. And again, we're going to go through and cut down the other side, starting by cutting off the tail region, splitting the halibut down the center on one side of the seam. Again, you don't want to split directly on that seam because it's going to give you one side that's much larger than the other, but you want to split along one side and then go back and cut your fillets just like before. Now I always brine my fish in a 5% brine for 2 to 3 hours, and then I'll rinse under cold running water and pat dry with paper towels. Now this has a few benefits. Number 1, it will season the fish from the inside out, giving it a much better overall flavor. Number 2, it's going to firm the flesh slightly, allowing you to sear it more evenly. And number 3, it's going to allow the fish to take in some extra moisture, so as it loses moisture during the natural cooking process, it's still going to be more moist overall. No one likes dry fish. Brining is your insurance policy. For more information just like this, head on over to stellaculinary.com.